Hey everyone, welcome to Revolutionary Health. I'm Charles Stevens.
I'm David Malebranche. Nice to meet y'all.
I think they already know us.
I hope so. Hey guys, what's going on? And ladies, and every gender
We
experience
love
in
all our
between.
viewers. Thank you, David. I guess we don't have to do introductions anymore since
Not that
they know
much.
us. But I will say, if you're watching this on Facebook, please like us on Facebook. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also join our email list at thecounternarrative.org. So I'm really excited about our conversation this evening because we got a lot of stuff to talk about.
We do.
Why don't we start with
With my colonoscopy.
let's start with David's. I have a note here, David's colonoscopy. Let's
Yeah.
start with it.
I feel so much lighter today, y'all. That's all I have to say. Um, no, I just want to give a report of my colonoscopy. I posted about 3 videos on my Facebook page during the course of the day. It was like before, right after, when I was still on propofol and a little bit high.
That's
And
like the wrong time to get
it
on
was the
social
wrong time, but I
media.
actually held it together pretty well.
Okay.
And then I posted something later on. And maybe we can post. I don't know if we can post my video on the counter narrative.
You filmed your
Yeah,
colonoscopy?
yeah, yeah. No, I didn't film the colonoscopy itself, but I filmed myself afterwards.
We'll have to
Stop it.
talk about that.
We'll talk about it later. I didn't do the Katie Couric where they like actually showed the inside of her colon.
See, that could have been
That would have been way too much.
That could have been breaking news.
It's not going to be breaking news. So it went well. I did have a little bit of a problem the next day. I had a little bit of abdominal pain that I had to get checked out. But it turned out to be nothing, so everything was good. I will tell people a few basic things, and I think if we can post the video that I shot, it's very informational. Like I
Sure.
broke down a lot of the stuff that I won't break down everything here. Um, but I will tell people that the hardest part is probably the prep beforehand. It's this 2 bottle prescription that you get, and the bottles are maybe about this big. They're like small little water bottles, but they have a flavored substance called. It's the prescription name of it was called Clear Pick, and basically you're supposed to drink one of them at about 6 p.m. and then drink a whole like at least 5 8-ounce glasses of water or some clear liquid afterwards. And then 11 o'clock or midnight, you're supposed to drink the second one straight up from the bottle, and then drink about 3 8-ounce glasses of water or clear liquid afterwards. You're not supposed to have any fluid or liquid 2 hours before the procedure. My procedure was at 8 o'clock. I got there at 7. I can tell you that the prep, it just basically gets all the stuff out of your intestines. So you're basically on the toilet all day, or all evening, I should say, and it's just water coming out. And so it can be irritating. One of my friends said that I made the mistake of wiping a lot while I was going through that experience, and I should have dabbed. And he said, "You wipe? That's going to make it more rough. You need a dab. You need a dab." So I didn't learn these things. At some point early in the morning, I got a little of
So let's stop for a second.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you should dab and not
dab and not wipe,
wipe,
because
okay.
you're going to the bathroom so much. It's kind of like when you have food poisoning.
Yeah.
And for lack of a better medical word, you're peeing out your ass. So it's literally like water. Like when you sit on the toilet, it sounds like you're taking a piss, but that's coming out of your butt. And when that keeps happening over and over again, which happens during the prep for a colonoscopy, it irritates your skin around your anus. And if you keep wiping on it, it's going to irritate it even more. So one of my friends was saying you should dab. You should just dab. And I was also using one of those moist towelettes that people use to kind of wipe and clean back there. And so I used that as well, and that helped. But hands down, the worst part of it was the prep. That like 12 hours before you do the procedure. The procedure itself went absolutely amazing. And they did actually a scope from above and below. And from what I heard from the doctors, they have to get back to me about some biopsy results. They found 1 polyp in my colon. This is a lot of information I'm giving y'all about my personal life. 1 polyp in my colon, and I had a little bit of gastritis or inflammation of the stomach lining, which is probably from acid. And so they just asked me to take some acid blockers. They said based on the biopsy results um, of the polyp that was in my colon, and a polyp is just a small little outgrowth of tissue, for those of you that don't know, but it can be a precursor to cancer. So typically they remove them, send them off to the pathology lab to make sure it's okay. If the biopsy is negative, then that means I can get my next colonoscopy in 10 years. Yes. If it looks suspicious at all, then I have to come back in 5. So the key to getting a colonoscopy is kind of how quickly you do the screening or the time interval between the screening. If there's anything suspicious, they'll have you come back 1, 3, or 5 years. If it looks
Wow.
completely clean or normal, they'll space it out every 10 years. So colonoscopy, if everything looks good, you don't have to come back but once every 10 years, which is pretty good for a screening procedure. So
Absolutely.
it went well. I would recommend it to people.
So was there any? So I know they put you under,
Mhm.
but was there any discomfort when you woke up?
No, no, it was
Could you
really
tell that you had just had a tube up your butt?
no,
Okay.
no, I didn't. I've heard horror stories from other people, like they still had some of like the lube or some of the greasy stuff back there, and they were like, they didn't even wipe me off, like those kind of things. But that wasn't my experience. Like they did a good job with it. All I remember was the gastrointestinal doctor that was doing the procedure from up front. He was the one that came in first. Then the colorectal doctor came in. They said, "Turn on your side, face me." The anesthesiologist said, "You're going to feel, I'm going to put the anesthetic in." It was propofol.
Mhm.
So, of course, when I heard propofol, I thought of Michael Jackson. I was like, oh, Lord, what's
Wow.
going on here? They're
Yeah.
going to try to put me to sleep for good. What's happening? But propofol, I guess, is used because, and I'm not an anesthesiologist, but it's used because it puts you to sleep quickly and then you wake up quicker and you don't have kind of the lag. You're not sleepy afterwards. So they just put me on my side. They injected it. I felt my eyes getting heavy. Next thing I knew, the nurse was waking me up, and it had been an hour. I was out for an hour.
Wow.
And she just said everything's fine. And I left maybe 15, 20 minutes after I woke up,
So you woke
and I
up and
was
you were
home.
out in 20 minutes.
I was out. I was out. I got there at 7 a.m. and I left the hospital at 9:30 a.m.
Wow.
I was home by 10.
Again, if y'all have any questions for David or about colonoscopies, or even if you want to share your experiences if you've had the procedure done, please share in the comments.
I would recommend it. It wasn't. It
So, what
wasn't
was
that
your
bad.
biggest fear about getting this done?
I didn't really have fears about getting it
Mhm.
done. I think a couple things snuck in at some point while I was doing the prep, because you kind of think you're going to sleep. What if you don't wake up, or what if they find something? But I didn't let those thoughts really invade my head. I
Mhm.
know a lot of people are scared out there of
Yeah.
this because you're scared that
Yeah.
when you have to they put you to sleep. It's not major surgery, but it's a minor invasive surgery that they do, or minor invasive procedure that they do have to put you to sleep for. And a lot of people are worried about what if they do find something? What if they do find a cancer? It's scary. And to everyone out there that's scared about it, yes, it's scary, but it's something you kind of want to face. And if you want to take care of your health, look out for yourself, your family, your loved ones. It's something you'll invest in.
What was the biggest surprise about all of it, everything? Like, what surprised you most?
I had an episode of nausea the night of while I was taking that prep liquid,
Mhm.
and then the day after, my stomach still felt I was still having some cramping and some discomfort.
Mhm.
I'm not sure whether that was the biopsies or something else was going on, but it was concerning enough to me that I had to miss a panel discussion I was supposed to be on and do some other
Mhm.
things. So,
Yeah.
um,
And how do
yeah,
you feel right now? Like,
I
so
feel
you're completely
I feel fine right
okay.
now. I feel a little bloated, but that's probably because of what I'm eating and has nothing to do with the colonoscopy. That's about it.
Okay. And finally, just any last words of wisdom for folks that are thinking about getting this done or in the age
So,
range?
if you don't have any family history, don't have any conditions like irritable bowel syndrome, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, the general standard is to actually start getting colonoscopies at 50. The American College of Gastroenterologists actually recommend that for those of us of African descent, we should start at actually 45 because we have worse outcomes. We tend to die more frequently or have a lot more complications from colorectal cancer. So
Mm.
if you're of African descent, bring it up to your physician, nurse practitioner, PA that you want to start getting screened at age 45. And that's an official recommendation from the American College of Gastroenterologists. It's not an A plus rating, meaning the science is not 100% backing it,
Yeah.
but it's enough that a lot of doctors and medical practitioners actually are doing it. And then
Yeah.
obviously, if you have a family history of colon cancer, you either start at age 40 or you subtract 10 years from when your family member was diagnosed. So
Mm.
if you had a family member that got diagnosed, like mother, father, aunt, uncle, that got diagnosed at 40 years of age, you start getting your colonoscopies at 30.
Mm.
And so that's what I would say with that.
We have a comment from Bernard. I've had the procedure and everything went all right, but if they find something serious like cancer, is there a support system to help people deal with the initial news?
I don't know. I'm certain they do
Mm.
have that. The way it got set up for me is that they had me sit down in a small room with the colorectal surgeon, and he just told me what he saw,
Mm.
and then, excuse me, the GI doctor called me on the phone later on and let me know what he saw. So, um, I'm sure they have social workers, case managers in the hospital. It's a busy place. They have a lot of support staff are there. So if they were to say we found a mass, like they wouldn't say it's cancer. They would say we found something, we took a piece of it, we biopsied it, and we'll let you know. So I don't think anyone would just say, "Oh my God, we saw this rip roaring cancer," unless someone was having symptoms and really was having a problem with it. This is for a screening colonoscopy,
Mm.
so you don't want to literally scare the shit out of somebody while they're right there. So I think they do have resources for that. But I think if they're unsure, and sometimes you can't tell with a polyp, you don't know whether it's precancerous or not. So you have to take it out. You have to take it out, send it to the lab, and see what they say.
Mm. And Bernard, thank you so much for that question. I think that's an
It's
important
it's a
recommendation.
very legitimate
Yeah.
question. Thanks, Bernard.
I mean, I think for me, if I'm honest, I guess I'll be getting ready to get it done in about 8 years.
Right.
Um, to even be, I know you're very out of, very open about it, but I think it might be hard for some of us to really tell our community, hey, we're having this done. I
Right.
don't know how this is gonna, and I think health stuff in general can be very difficult to talk about for some of us.
I agree. I
Hmm.
actually struggled with it myself because I wasn't going to post on it
Hmm.
and I wasn't going to be very vocal about it, even after last week when we
Yeah.
mentioned it. But then someone reminded me, they were like, "Hey, David, you're a doctor. You have a voice. Um, in the community, you post a lot about a lot of different things, and this would be important." And I can't tell you the number of people who actually sent me direct messages, called me, checked in on me, and then also commented and said, "Oh yeah, I forgot. I was supposed to get one and I got to go to see my doctor. I've been putting it off, but thank you. The way you broke it down was perfect the way I need to see it."
Yeah.
So you kind of realize that the more visible we are about stuff like this, it's like similar to, when folks talking about HIV, talking
Hmm.
about HIV treatment, talking about PrEP, those kind of things. If the conversation is more quote unquote normalized, whatever
Hmm.
that means, I think more people the stigma will go away from it. And there is
Yeah.
stigma with colonoscopies. Um, and a lot of it's based on fear. I think we're just scared.
I think about my friend Ibrahim Ferizadeh. He would talk about the, as he would say, erotophobia, and like the ways that assholes are kind of stigmatized in
Right,
general, and there
right,
being all this angst, anxiety in general about our body parts.
right,
Which I think also, I mean, we talk about health, but we also talk about culture because they're very tied, in
right,
politics and power and
right,
all those sorts of things.
right.
All right. Why don't we move forward? So I guess to sum up, if you are of African descent
Hmm.
and you're 45, then you should probably start looking into getting a colonoscopy. And if you have a family history, you should subtract 10 years from the
When
age
your family member was
when
diagnosed,
your family member was
or
diagnosed,
at the age of 40. Those are
or
the
the age of 40.
current
Yeah.
recommendations. And then if you have any other chronic diseases,
Mm.
ulcerative colitis, like I said, Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndrome, at some point they're going to want to take a look inside
Mm.
and just make sure there's nothing else going on.
But definitely by 50.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we're moving on to our next topic.
Let's go.
All right. May 19th is hepatitis testing day. And I asked David if he'd be willing to talk a bit about hepatitis
Hmm.
and just what folks need to know about how it impacts us.
Okay.
So let's just start. Yeah.
Um, so hepatitis is the word itself means inflammation of the liver, and
Hmm.
particularly of the liver cells. And when we talk about hepatitis, it could be infectious, so caused by a virus, and I think this is what we're talking about for this. But
Hmm.
hepatitis can also be autoimmune, so your immune
Hmm.
system can attack. You can have drugs or medications that can impact and cause hepatitis. You can also have other things that cause hepatitis, gallstones, things
Hmm.
like that. But when we talk about hepatitis, the three major ones that I would say when we're talking about viruses are hepatitis A, B, and C.
Hmm.
And those are the ones we get tests for a lot. Hepatitis A is the one that's usually spread from, I don't want to say fecal oral or fecal oral or like anal oral. I just say if you're eating somebody's ass, if you're tossing salad,
Which is a
that's
scientific term, by the way. Tossing salad
it's a
is the
medical term.
medical
So
term for
I
analingus.
don't like using those kind of terms like fecal oral. It just sounds so stupid when you're talking to on YouTube or
Okay.
Facebook. So it's usually when you're eating somebody's ass. And so, everyone says it's gay sex. So someone will be like, "Oh, well, if you're an MSM, a man who has sex with other men, and you're eating someone's ass." And I was like, well, straight people do the same thing too. So my message to everyone out there is it doesn't matter if you are same gender loving or what your sexual orientation is or what your gender identity is. If you're actually doing oral anal sex, if you're eating somebody's ass, tossing somebody's salad, you could be at risk for hepatitis A. The symptoms of hepatitis are usually you'll get diarrhea, nausea, abdominal pain, sometimes dark urine because of the damage in the liver sometimes happens. Um, and then finally, you get what's called jaundice, or your skin or eyes will turn more
Mm.
yellow. And so the important components, those are the symptoms no matter what when you get acutely sick with hepatitis. Hepatitis A hits you, you get sick, and then it goes on its merry way. You're
Yeah.
done. Hepatitis B hits you, you get sick, and then maybe about 15%, 20% end up having long-term problems
Mm.
and then having a risk of getting hepatocellular cancer or cancer of the liver cells at a
Yeah.
later point in time. But that's a minority. Maybe about 1 in 5, 1 in 6 will
And how
do
is
that.
hepatitis B acquired?
Hepatitis B is acquired through the same risk factors as HIV.
Mm.
So typically, sex without condoms, IV drug use, any way it can get into the blood. And the important thing with hepatitis B to know is that it's about 25 times more infectious than HIV. So
Mm.
your likelihood, just from a stats perspective, of contracting hepatitis B far outweighs you catching HIV with those kind
Mm.
of quote unquote risk factors. Um, Hepatitis C is transmitted primarily IV drug use
Mhm.
historically. Sexual contact, we've seen a lot of acute cases among men who have sex with men recently, among gay men. And so I think people underestimate hepatitis C and how much of it is actually caused through
Through
sexual
sex, yeah.
contact. Hepatitis C is the one you want to look out for because that's the one that most likely you can live with for a long period of time
Yeah.
and you don't know what's going on. And then about 30 to 40 years, it really starts causing damage to your liver, like cirrhosis or hardening of the liver, and then also can be a risk for liver cancer. Um, with hepatitis A, there's really no treatment because
Mm.
it comes and goes and it leaves you. So you get sick, then you move on. There is a vaccine for hepatitis A, though. So when you talk about hepatitis A, you can get a vaccine, which is a series of 2 shots. Hepatitis B, there is a vaccine,
Mm.
which is a series of 3 shots. And there is a treatment, or there are several oral treatments, but they're not cures.
Yeah.
So there's no cure for hepatitis B. Um, or hepatitis A, but you can get vaccinated for both. Hepatitis C is the interesting one in that maybe like up until about 6 years ago, 5, 6 years ago, we only had a really crappy medication called interferon where you
Mm.
got an injection every week and it made you sick as a dog and you had to take that for a year. That was the only cure that we had for hepatitis C. In today's world, we actually have several different oral pills
Mm.
that make up either 2 medicines or 1 medicine that you can take for 2 to 3 months, most likely 3 months, one pill once a day, and it's a cure for hepatitis C.
Mm.
So about 90% of people will actually completely clear the virus and be cured of hepatitis C. So that's kind of a big deal. The only problem with that is that the medications are very, very expensive.
Yes.
Um, Anywhere from 40 to 60,000 for the 2 to 3
Wow.
months. But if you don't have insurance, don't let that stop you because there are patient assistance programs, medications like Harvoni, Eclipsa. There are a few other ones, like 3 or 4 other ones that come up to mind that can treat different strains of
Mm.
hepatitis C can help. So, in short, if I were to summarize this, hepatitis A, self-limiting illness, you get sick as a dog and then it passes on its way, no chronic long-term effects, transmitted through oral anal contact. Hepatitis B, transmitted the same way as HIV, condomless sex, IV drug use. Um, Stays long-term about
Mm.
20% of the time. There are treatments for it, but no cure. Hepatitis C, mostly IV drug use, some sexual transmission, and there is a cure nowadays. Like I said, vaccinations are present for hepatitis A and hepatitis B. There is no vaccination for hepatitis C.
Could you say a bit about how gay men are able to acquire hepatitis C sexually?
Um, it's probably going to be through condomless sex as well. It's
Mm.
interesting because sometimes when you look at hepatitis C,
Because it's related to blood.
yeah, it's related to blood, so it's going to get in the same way. There used to be pie charts where they would show like what
Mm.
percentage got, what percentage of quote unquote risk category. So they would say IV drug use was like maybe like 40 or 50%.
Mm.
And then they would say 15% sexually acquired, and then 20%, 20 to 30% unknown risk factor. And I was always looking at those and I was like, how can there be 30% where you don't know what caused it?
Mm.
My suspicion is that there's a lot more sexual
Yeah.
transmission of hepatitis C than people think. Um, Hepatitis C used to be the one that you didn't want to get
Mhm.
because there wasn't a cure. The treatment was really crappy. And that was the one that more likely than not led to cirrhosis,
Mm.
and led to hardening of the liver and cancer complications. But now with this cure, it's actually pretty good. And if you look at screening, like screening
Mm.
tests for all of these, like some people may say, well, how often do I have to get checked for hepatitis
Mhm.
A, B, or C? How do I know I've been exposed to it? It is kind of a complicated subject, but to break it down simply, you can get a blood test to see exactly if your body has produced antibodies or proteins to fight hepatitis A.
Mhm.
You can see whether you've been exposed, whether you've been vaccinated. Same thing with hepatitis B. Hepatitis C, there's just an antibody test that you check.
Yeah.
And you can see whether you've been exposed at any point in time. Now, important to know, if you were born before 1965, like if you're a baby boomer, it's recommended as a screening test.
Yeah.
It's also recommended as a screening test if you're a man who has sex with men or someone else who's about to start PrEP.
Mm.
You want to make sure you don't have hepatitis C. And then hepatitis B screening is also advised if you're a man who has sex with other men or if you're about to start PrEP. So some of these tests, when you go into your doctor's, nurse practitioner's office, make sure you ask them if you're getting sexually transmitted infection screening. Ask them about hepatitis A, B, and C, and discuss your risk for it, and if you could be at risk, how you can test for it if you need the vaccines. Those are common conversations to have, but I can guarantee you. When providers do sexually transmitted infection or STI testing, they're not routinely checking for hepatitis A, B, and C. I can guarantee you that. We
Mm.
usually check for, we talked about this before, HIV, syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia,
But not hepatitis A, B, and
not
C.
hepatitis A, B, and C. So if you're concerned about it, any history of IV drug use, condomless sex,
Mm.
if you've been eating somebody's ass or somebody's been eating your ass, and also I forgot to mention with hepatitis A, healthcare workers. So, or not healthcare workers and restaurant workers. I'm sorry.
Mm.
More importantly, with
Mhm.
restaurant workers, because this is why you see in a restaurant there'll always be a diagram outside the bathroom or in the bathroom that says "Employees wash your hands."
Oh, that's what that's about.
Because what's happening is that if someone has hepatitis A, the virus gets shed out when you're
Mhm.
going to the bathroom because you'll have diarrhea. And so if you don't wash your hands and then you go and cook and prepare somebody's food, it can be transmitted. That's why you'll see outbreaks of hepatitis A at restaurants where they have to shut things down, and also on cruises. Sometimes when you're captive like that, if someone has a self-limiting illness and then they're preparing somebody's food, that way they can kind of, the hepatitis A can get in and really cause like a short-term epidemic.
Could you talk a bit about
Which is crazy.
prevention
Prevention?
for A, B, and C? How do you prevent from getting it?
Um, I think screening is important
Mm.
first and foremost. So asking your medical provider to do those tests for you. Obviously, with hepatitis B and C,
Mm.
using clean needles.
Mhm.
If you have a choice, don't inject drugs. But if you are injecting anything, make sure you get, if there's a needle exchange program in your area or something like that, don't reuse a needle or use somebody else's needle. That'll help you protect yourself against hepatitis B and C. Condoms, as we talked about, safer sexual practices. And then for hepatitis A, it's hard with that. I wouldn't tell anybody not to have oral anal sex. Some people will use like cellophane or some
Mhm.
kind of
Like saran wrap.
like a saran wrap or
Yeah.
a barrier to help them out. But I don't know whether those necessarily work. And viruses that are shed out like that, even though visibly you can't see anything, a virus can still be shed. And so even if your mouth is down there, you still could be exposed. So it would be hard. So if you're dealing with a partner and they've had a diarrheal illness or they've had some other illness and you're worried about it, then I wouldn't go down on them.
Mm.
If that were the case,
Mm.
I'd wait a little while to figure out what's going on.
Please let us know if you have questions about hepatitis or if you have experience. Just let us know and share your insights.
It's really medical today.
I know.
I know, right?
Oh, we're about to turn.
Okay. He's like, we're about to turn on this, right?
One of the conversations I know I've heard people having in our community is around finding your tribe, and I even in places like DC and
Right.
Oakland and Chicago,
Right.
I hear folks from our community talking about their struggles in connecting to a tribe or finding a community.
Right.
And this has definitely been a reoccurring conversation on revolutionary health. It's also something that even within the County Narrative Project, we've talked a lot about. And, I just thought we'd spend some time talking a bit about what it means to find your tribe and how one finds community.
Sure. Oh, before I
Sure.
forget, if you want more information on hepatitis, the CDC has a really good summaries of hepatitis A, B, and C. So go to cdc.gov if you want to get more information. Okay. So I wanted to give people more information.
Oh no, that's a good idea.
I gave a lot of information. Then I was like, if I was watching, I would have been like, okay, I'd have to watch that over again to kind of do that because my head was spinning as I was talking.
A lot of information. It was good information.
It's a lot of information.
I learned a lot.
All right, so finding your tribe.
Finding your tribe.
What do you think? I've been talking nonstop for like 20 minutes. Come on.
I'm sure you have more to say.
I do. How do you find your tribe, Charles Stevens? Or is the counter narrative your tribe?
It's one of my tribes.
Right.
I definitely think that as we get older, it might sometimes be difficult in, being the spontaneous social encounters that one might have. And of course, we have folks like, I know some folks are like, oh, they have tons of friends and it's not an issue for them. And I think there are others where it does become a challenge, especially, when we talk about like thinking about the impact of the 80s and 90s, particularly in our community where so many of us died.
Right.
That's had absolutely an impact on our community and in connections and so forth.
Right.
So I think there are a lot of ways to cut it. And also talk to, very young people that share their struggles with being social. For example, a lot of people think when they move to Atlanta that there'll be lots of community and lots of people and lots of friendships. And that's not always the case, although it is for some people. And so I was just hoping that we could maybe just offer some suggestions about finding a tribe. I mean, honestly, I kind of look to y'all too. So please share your insights in the comments. Like, how have you found your tribe? And what does that mean for you? What is your tribe? Like, how would you even define your tribe?
Right.
So I just got a text that was related to this.
Was it?
Not at all.
Okay.
It looked like it for a minute. I was like, oh, that's something very different.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to find your tribe, and I think your point about Atlanta is a good one. Because people think that just by the sheer numbers of Black gay men in Atlanta that you can easily find your tribe, and sometimes it's hard. And I do think it's generational and age related.
Was it hard for you to find your tribe here, or do you have a tribe?
I have different tribes. So I think if I were to say for myself, when I was younger, I had more energy and effort and patience to run around and do other things. I think I found myself as I was getting older, getting more settled in with good friends that I had, people that I trusted, long-term relationships.
No new friends?
No new friends, yeah, basically like Drake. But it is hard for me to make new friends because it takes an effort. And I don't speak to my old friends as much as I would like to. And, relationships change over time. So there may be certain points of time when you're in your 20s where you needed to check in every day. You needed to see each other frequently and do all this other stuff. As a relationship goes on, I think it's the same as with a marriage or an intimate partnership. Like, you may not need to do all that stuff all the time. There's a certain level of comfort and familiarity that you have, so you don't need to make all that effort. And I think for me, that's kind of been the case. And then also situations have happened. I've been immature before and have done messed up things in relationships that broke up friendships.
Yeah.
People have done messed up stuff to me that I felt I needed to walk away. So some friends step up surprisingly at different times. Others kind of fade to the background. So I think finding your tribe is like a continual ebb or flow, and it's a very fluid process. For me right now, I have tribes that I travel with. I have tribes that I may go out to eat or dinner with. I have tribes that I go out to movies or do cultural events with. I have tribes that I do activism.
Why are you pointing at me?
You and Johnny, that we get to do all this stuff
I can't
together.
I can't be the friend that travels. I can't be the
You
friend
don't travel with me. When have we traveled together?
I never got the invitation.
I never got one either. Go figure.
You're the travel. I mean, I think there are different models. Like, I mean, there are definitely folks that kind of compartmentalize in a way. So they're like, these are my friends that I do community stuff with. These are my friends that I do more social stuff with. These are my friends that I share these secrets with.
Right.
Then I think for me though, I don't like to compart. Like I like combos. Right. Like I want to be able to do lots of different things with the same people.
You want a bundle?
I want a bundle.
You want to bundle your tribes?
Which doesn't always work that well. Like one of my constant struggles is, I like, some of my artistic sensibilities or my cultural sensibilities can be, a little different. Right. So like these are my friends that I might want to see some snooty movie with, but then I also want to go see, some like
ratchet kind of torture porn horror film.
No, that's you.
Oh, sorry.
But like, no, but I do. Yeah, exactly. So just wanting, and I honestly, I don't think it's a good model. I mean, I think that people are complicated and you really can't do everything with everybody.
Right.
And I've also had a similar experience too, where my friends that I had when I was much younger, a lot of us have grown apart. Your lives change, things get different. Even though I lived in Atlanta my entire life,
Right. So I
I
moved to
found.
Philly and then moved back. So like depending on kind of where I was
But
would
you know what's
depend.
funny? I see you more now than I did before. Like I feel like when you were in Atlanta before, I never saw you.
I was on my grind.
You were on your
I
grind,
was
yeah.
really grinding a lot. I
I mean,
think
even though our lives intersected, it's like you're one of those people I only saw at conferences, and I'll be like,
right.
"Hey, David."
I'd be like, hey Charles, what's up? Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
it changes, but I think you can find your tribe. And I think your tribe can be defined differently as you kind of move along life. But I think you're right about compartmentalizing because sometimes like a friend that you thought was just in this box, like
yeah.
maybe your travel person or you went to church with or you did this, that, and the other. All of a sudden you like step out and you realize they like something else that you did, or
Well,
you hang
that's
out
my
and
that's so my struggle
I think that's
because
cool.
people love to put me in a box, and they are like, Charles can only do, Charles
Activism.
only sits up and reads. I don't know, like James Baldwin, which I love James Baldwin. They think I sit up and like, he's
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, no, I'm
You
not
only,
an
I think you
activist
only
24
read
7.
bell hooks. I think you sit up
Exactly,
every
like I,
night and read bell
and I'm
hooks.
like,
Mm-hmm.
so and maybe I think that is also when you get older, because I think when I was younger, I didn't feel as confined to these
Right. Right.
assumptions.
I think it comes with growth.
Mhm.
It comes with growth and
Well,
maturity.
we have a comment.
Yeah.
Bernard says my tribe has changed over the years. Now it is smaller in number, not limited to Black and or gay men, and mostly centered around my artistic career. But I spend more time alone these days. And Bernard also says his tribe has changed over the years. I mean, thank you so much for sharing that, Bernard. And I think that's the case for so many of us. But I'll also add that I do enjoy running into old friends,
Right.
and reminiscing, and
Right.
having nostalgia
Right.
and just sharing memories.
Right.
As I've gotten older, in some ways I've gotten less patient with
Right.
certain things. Like I'm too old for this. I
I
am not.
told
I'm
you.
grown. I'm not putting up with this. And then there's also me, especially what makes me also patient though, in a weird way, is just knowing that a lot of us didn't make it to 30. I know that even in my cohort
Right.
of Black gay men coming of age in the aughts in Atlanta, and particularly in activism, a lot of us didn't make it. I
Right.
think about, I mean, I have stories, and I always share this. There are stories where people in those memories, none of them are on this earth anymore.
Right.
And I think a lot of us have that. I talk a lot about that with some of people around my age, and it's real. And so I don't want to necessarily throw people away. Like
Right.
it's important to cultivate, but I think also when your life is very full and there's so much going on and so many distractions, sometimes it's hard to even think the text and
Right.
remember birthdays and checking on people.
Right. I
Yeah,
think, and with social media, it makes it a lot different now
yeah.
than what it was back then. But I think if I were to make recommendations or suggest things to anybody about this, I would just say, be open to the journey. You're going to gain new friends. You're going to lose some old friends. You're going to keep people that are going to be with you for the rest of your natural born life. Don't get hung up on all this other stuff, but go with what affirms you
Go with
at
what
certain
affirms
points.
you. Yeah.
And if you need something at a certain point, um, those people make you feel good about yourself and affirm you and support you during that period of your struggle, during that period of your time, then be close to them, stick close to them. And I think the general rule for me is just hang around positive people. Like be
Mhm.
around somebody who's going to be positive and affirming with you. And if they're giving you some
Yeah.
negativity on a consistent basis, then
Yeah.
bounce,
Like,
run.
how do you feel about it? How does it make you? Yeah, I mean, that's one of my rules too. If I don't feel good, if I'm around people or around someone, and I don't feel like they're
Right,
contributing, and
right,
I had to set some boundaries early on with relationships, especially because it's not acceptable for me to be treated poorly. And I unfortunately think there is some ways in which certain kinds of behaviors are normalized in our
right,
community,
right,
especially around how we talk to each other.
right,
My thing is, like, it's so easy to say something kind to someone.
right,
Um, and so I never get it when people are just like really nasty to each other or really shady. So things like
right,
that. I mean, that's also kind of weeded out some forces in my life too.
right.
But it's also a check,
But I
you know.
think, and I think as you get older, the amount of scars and trauma from not only intimate relationships, but then also our friendships, what we've been hurt by, what we've gone through, this, that, and the other, we carry all that with us.
Mhm.
And so as we get older, we get afraid to make ourselves more vulnerable with friends and intimate partners. We get afraid to try something new because when something gets familiar and comfortable, we tend to stay in that space. And so I have this challenge myself. Like sometimes I just rather sit at home and be on my own. And so I'll
Yeah.
tend to not step out there, but I have to kind of keep encouraging myself to like, David, go out and do something different. When someone invites you to go someplace, your knee jerk is going to say no, but you never know what could happen when you go to an event with somebody or when you say yes to somebody who's asking you to do something. Maybe they needed you at that moment for something, and maybe it's not all about you, or maybe there's an experience that's waiting for you that you didn't think you were going to have, but now is going to change your life.
Uh-oh.
You
Ivan
never
says
know.
that you jump. It's LOL. Jump right over me. We jumped over. Ivan, we jumped over you. What did we jump over you?
What
Did you have a
happened?
question?
Is there a comment?
I guess he feels like his comment didn't get read or something. Could you? I'm sorry. Sorry. What's the comment? Let us know and we'll respond to it. um, yeah, but I do believe that there's so many emotional benefits to having a tribe, and I think a lot of us have to figure it out. But again, it's like it's about what makes you feel good. And your tribe doesn't necessarily have to be just like you. I mean, I think there's a lot of beauty and richness and diversity.
Absolutely.
But it's absolutely a journey. I think it's when you're David. You're still my baby, bro.
What's it, Ivan?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Even though I'm old, thanks, Ivan. You're my older bro. Hey.
uh, I think we wanted to have. I know Johnny's wanting us to wrap up, but I wanted to just touch on the DL one more time since apparently it's back and we have to banquet. Oh, poor Johnny. He's like,
Johnny's shooting himself in the head right now.
are you on the down low?
I am.
Don't David, don't play like that because I'm getting crazy emails.
No, I think that it's making a cycle back.
But I feel like we're talking about different things, right? Because there are people that identify as DL, and it's not in the sense that they're married and they're leading sort of a double life or a secret life. It's more about a certain affinity with the kind of masculine culture, and so they're not necessarily living a double life kind of thing. It's like they see themselves as discreet, or they may not necessarily identify as gay.
Well, it could be more about discretion. I mean, the whole phrase "down low" came about, discretion, keep it on the low, like be discreet about it, and so that didn't pertain. That wasn't specific or bisexual brothers who were married and cheating on their wives with other dudes.
Who coined the term? Like, who made it? Was that JL King?
I don't know whether JL King did it. Maybe it was R. Kelly. R. Kelly made it big. TLC had songs back in the day. So I mean, all these things happen, but I think it just gets recycled as generations come about. And one of the things that Brittany, who the producer on this panel discussion, brought to me, she said, there's a lot of Black women that are talking about it still. And so she said to me on the phone, she said, well, I think for a lot of Black gay men, you're living in a bubble because you've experienced this a lot. And I told her, I was like, well, I think also like Black women are living in a bubble as well. So we have our separate bubbles. But if you're not hearing of things on the outside, then you just go to a certain truth. And, she said, you know how scary it is for us to have to worry about this with every guy. We have to ask if they're gay. We have to ask if they're
this, that, and the other. Is she sure it's not just a her thing, or like is it?
Oh no! It sounds like she talked to a lot of people.
I feel like there was a time when you would listen to the radio, and it was all, if you talk about men in Atlanta, there was always there was a certain conversation around Black men in Atlanta that would go something like either in jail or gay and all. And I feel like I haven't heard that in so long.
Someone told me about the conversation, like I guess on V103 they had a conversation after Donald. Was that you saying? After Donald Glover's video, "This Is America" came out, all they were talking about is how he was dancing like he was a homo or he was effeminate, and that took over predominantly the conversation about "This Is America," which is the last thing.
But I still feel like that's different than him being on the download.
It's different, but it also speaks to kind of the way people are going to see things, or the way people are going to watch
I definitely think,
or how they interpret things. They come across on screen.
I definitely feel like we're in this moment in the Black community, and oh my God, please don't tell me there are Black communities. Okay, fine, Black communities. As if it didn't occur to me that Black people were on the bottom of it.
Right.
I think we're in a moment where there are these figures that are becoming prominent through their allegiance to a certain kind of heterosexual masculinity.
Right.
I mean, I think that's absolutely, there was a fixation with Umar Johnson. I think that's a fixation with Tariq Nasheed, who uses this term moist to refer to non-heterosexual men, I guess. So I just feel like I wonder with if there is a strand of our community that feels like they cling to these very traditional notions of I guess Black family and things like that.
And that drives some of the down low conversation,
or at least some of the because where I think it shows up the most is definitely in around HIV criminalization.
and that's the point that I always bring, because there's something about the concept of being caught up in what masculinity means, what gay means versus what not gay means, and what being a Black masculine male means in society and those kind of things. But where the conversation always steers left to me with down low is when it always gets linked with HIV, even though there are anecdotal cases of women, obviously, who've contracted HIV from a bisexual husband. There is no doubting that at all. But the scientific literature on a large scale suggests and implies and actually confirms that most of the cases among heterosexual Black women who contract HIV is not because they slept with a down low man. It's because of other things, whether it be IV drug use, or whether it was multiple sex partners, or whether it was something else structural that was going on, maybe having sex with a heterosexual brother who wasn't taking care of their HIV, and wasn't on treatment, so their viral load was high. But it always seems to come down to this kind of Black DL boogeyman that's causing it. And it's very one directional in that it starts with gay men who are the source of HIV. They give it to the bisexual brother who's a predator, and then he preys on the unsuspecting and hapless and innocent Black woman who has no agency over her sexuality, her body, her choices in life, and she's the victim always in this case.
And we all lose,
and we all lose. We all lose. We all lose in that narrative.
It's not a discourse that
we all
empowers anyone. It's not a discourse, because part of what's wrong with even the formulation of how this discourse comes about is that it leaves structures off the hook. It doesn't look at access to healthcare. It doesn't look at how so many Black folks, we have so many health disparities in our community with regard to all kinds of conditions, and HIV is one of them.
Incarceration.
It doesn't, exactly, it doesn't hold institutions accountable. So we end up blaming ourselves. And so we end up in this fight with each other about who's to blame. Meanwhile, the institutions and structures continue on, creating these this reality where we end up not getting access to quality healthcare, where we still suffer from significant economic insecurity, and the litany of forces that create the structural violence that we all end up having to deal with. There are a lot of comments. I think you kind of
tapped into something.
My favorite one. Okay, so Bernard says Dale King popularized it as applicable to Black gay SGL communities. It was R. Kelly first. Generally, they happen to coincide. Ben Robinson says, "I'm mad. We're still talking about the DL. I'm mad too, Ben. I
am too.
I was like, I wasn't gonna talk about it, but
he brought it up today.
The people said they wanted me to talk. I always blame the dark skinned man.
Well,
I'm still talking about the DL.
Now we're doing colorism too. We doing colorism.
However,
might as well.
homosexuality.
Since DL is in, let's go back and all get away from me.
However, it still remains such a taboo topic in our community. I wish we could just have an honest conversation about it and leave all the scare tactics out of it."
Who said that, Ben?
Ben Robinson.
Yeah, Ben.
James Lester says, "Bravo." I mean, we really have to have honest. And even though I got mad at David a little bit for doing the panel, I mean, I do appreciate him going into the hornet's nest and being willing. Well, I mean, but being willing to have those hard conversations, because you're obviously not. It's so easy to just preach to the choir, so to speak. But you're one of those folks that go into these environments where you are facing a lot of heterosexism. A lot of people looking at you and really speaking truth to power in those spaces. And I applaud you for that, because it's a lot of us, you go into this audience and they're all like,
but I mean, the thing is that you get exhausted with it, and you realize that even though you're sick of the topic, for a lot of people, it's new, or they're just getting misinformation right now. And if you're not present at the table to actually combat the misinformation, then the false narrative continues. And we see that every day with that person squatting in the White House right now, is that when you put out a narrative daily on Twitter or whatever else it is, and people don't have something to combat the lies or the falsehoods, then whatever is told is going to be taken as truth. And so it's on all of us, even though we may be sick of talking about it, even though we may be sick of addressing it. If someone from a news organization will come to me and say, "Hey, we really need to talk about this," I fought it originally, but then I agreed to do it. And unfortunately, I couldn't do it afterwards. But I would have done it because I would have said, like, hey, it's important for me to be there because I can bring my experience as a provider, as a researcher, all the work that I did in the aughts about it. I could have brought all that to the table and really educated people about it. And if you change one person's mind and then they share some information with other people, then it kind of spreads like that. But I feel you, because when you said it, I was kind of like,
You know who
when
brought
she
it
first
back?
recommended, I didn't want to do it.
You know who brought it back? I think it was Lee Daniels that brought it back, because I started hearing about it, especially around when he was doing Precious.
He's always been a big proponent
and he
of
would
it.
say things.
Him and Tyler Perry.
Tyler Perry, obviously, like he created this DL storyline for colored girls. I'm like, how did you
Awful.
integrate?
It was awful.
I was mad at Janet.
Janet.
I ain't gonna lie, I was mad at Janet for a minute. We made up. Me and Janet Jackson, we made up, but I was mad. We were mad. I was mad for about a minute.
Let's wait a while.
I was like, Janet, don't do that. But maybe we should do a DL discussion.
We will at some point. But we
county
can't
narrative
tonight because Johnny wants us to wrap up.
Johnny is telling us it's time to go.
We're way over.
Way over. I'm gonna read just a few more comments. The last comment. To be honest, the DL appears to be explicitly rejected by increasing numbers of Black gay men. This tends to be more widely discussed adjacent to heterosexual female folks, but less and less among BGMs. Yes. Thank you, Bernard.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank y'all so much for tuning in. As always, please like this video on Facebook if you're watching it on Facebook. If you're watching it on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and like us on YouTube. And please, please, please join our email list at thecounternarrative.org. We're really trying to grow the audience for our Revolutionary Health series, and we're always trying to expand our counter narrative tribe. And if you're looking for a tribe, join the counter narrative tribe.
Absolutely, we're a tribe you can join.
We're a tribe you can join.
Get your colonoscopies, get checked for hepatitis A, B, or C, and find your tribe.
That's your homework assignment. If you're, if you're
that's good.
Eligible, as David put out,
right?
Get your colonoscopy screening and let us know how it goes.
Absolutely.
And I guess we'll look back. Is when you get your results back from the.
I should have gotten something today, but I haven't heard from anybody yet. So we'll see what happens. I'll let y'all know.
All right, everyone. Thank y'all so much. Take care.
All right. Have a good night.